Welcome everyone to the Strategy, People and Research Environment Town Hall.
Yes, welcome to today's REF Town Hall, where we are discussing the Strategy, People and Research Environment sub-profile. My name is Hazel Corradi, and I'm one of the REF Senior Policy and Engagement Advisors. And I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Emmett, another one of the Senior Policy and Engagement Advisors.
And our colleagues, Jonathan Piotrowski and Duncan Shermer, will be joining us later for the questions. Today's session is to talk through the guidance, which will take about half an hour. Then we will have time for questions at the end. Please do use the Q&A function to ask questions. We know that there will be many more questions than we can cover today, but please still ask them. Your questions are really important to us as they help us understand where more clarification is needed. This session is being recorded and will hopefully be available within the next week. We are currently working towards the criteria phase with panels in the next few weeks, and we are planning further engagement with the sector, including with research managers. This will all feed into the final guidance, which we aim to publish in the autumn of this year. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So before we get into the depths of the SPRE guidance, I would just want to, as we always do in these sessions, just frame the conversation that we're having. So for those of you who've been to these before, apologies, there'll just be a couple of minutes where we're talking about what REF actually is. Because when we talk about the Research Excellence Framework, it's always important to put what we're doing and the exercise itself into context. So we're just going to take a moment to highlight the fact that the REF is owned and led by the 4 higher education funding bodies across the UK. It is used to inform the allocation of around £2 billion worth of block grant funding every year, but it also provides accountability for that public investment in research, and it is continually evolving in reflection of the fact that the sector itself is continually evolving as well. Given its connection to the allocation of funding, it does inevitably drive behaviour, and therefore we are very conscious that it is a significant policy instrument across the UK. Next slide, please. We function with a number of principles and key functions for REF 2029, and the 3 priorities and principles were developed through consultation with the sector in the lead up to this exercise, and we use them to drive our decision making. And I just want to focus in on the 3rd box on this slide, the areas that shape how REF makes decisions. These priorities form a triangle of factors that need to be weighed and balanced against each other with every decision that is made and every piece of guidance that is published. And those 3 elements are the robustness of the assessment outcomes, the impact that the REF has on the system in terms of the impact on research culture, and ensuring that the bureaucratic burden on the system is proportionate. And so with all the decisions that we make and all the developments that we move forward, we are trying to balance those 3 elements. And I'm going to hand over to Hazel to talk more about SPRE. Next slide, please.
Sorry, microphone issue. So what guidance has been developed over a complex journey, but we are confident that we now have a good balance of evolving the guidance from last time in line with sector developments around research culture, whilst retaining the template structure from 2021 to reduce the overall change. The initial decisions expressed a desire to increase the weighting of the environment element, to increase the focus on the assessment of the conditions that are an essential feature of research excellence. We have still retained this direction, as SPRE is now worth 20% compared to 15% for the environment in 2021, but we have reduced this from our initial plan to have it worth 25%. We have listened to the sector and recognised that the institutional risk in changing the weighting, we needed to moderate that. The reduction in the weighting also reflects our scaled back approach from what was piloted for this element in the People, Culture and Environment, or PCE pilot. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all the institutions and panel members who took part in the pilot for their generous investment of expertise and insight. Although the SPRE elements will not look exactly like the pilot, there are a number of aspects of learning from the PCE pilot that are being taken forward, including the indicators and the focus on adaptation and distance travelled. So we did publish the Strategy, People and Research Environment Guidance module on the 10th of December last year. The SPRE sub-profile recognises that strategies are an active way institutions respond to their operating contexts in order to build excellent research environments, with an emphasis on how this is done at institutional level, whilst also valuing unit level activity. SPRE values diverse cultures and research environments that enable excellent and responsible research engagement and impact. The current guidance does not include the templates or final indicators, which will be confirmed with the panels over the next few months and published as soon as possible after that. Next slide, please. So to summarise the key changes from the environment statement in 2021 for 2029. So firstly, as I mentioned, the SPRE sub-profile is now worth 20% of the unit profile, with CKU weighted at 55% and engagement and impact at 25%. Secondly, the institution level statement that was piloted in 2021 will now be mandatory and assessed for all institutions. We are still keeping a unit level statement, but the unit level statement will be worth 40% of the SPRE sub-profile, and the institutional statement will be worth 60% of the SPRE sub-profile. To acknowledge that different institutions are starting in different places with regards to building diverse and supportive research environments, we are encouraging the discussion of the journey travelled since the last REF and recognising reflection and development as forms of excellence. The unit level statement will also now include 2 new context sections. With decoupling and the focus of SPRE on the wider population who research and who enable and support research, engagement and impact, we are wanting units to celebrate this wider group of roles and careers that create the unit excellence. By naming the roles and careers, in absence of submitted names, this will also allow the panels to appreciate the community being discussed in the rest of the statement. Finally, the statement of representation, which should be familiar from its discussion in the contributions to knowledge and understanding guidance, will explain how the unit's outputs are representative of their research activity and inform the assessment of the claims around research, culture and diversity within the unit level statement. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So I'm just going to talk through the approach to assessment for SPRE. So as environment statements were in REF 2021, SPRE statements will be assessed holistically against 2 criteria, vitality and sustainability. And we encourage the use of additional qualitative and quantitative data or indicators to strengthen those narratives. REF 2029 is looking for excellent research environments which enable diverse and excellent research, engagement and impact, and which are supportive of their people and contribute positively to the wider ecosystem. Now, we recognise that this takes time, and therefore we are asking HEIs, as Hazel has mentioned, to consider the distance travelled and the strategies that are being used to sustain and improve the research environment since the last exercise. So distance travelled and adaptive strategies can demonstrate excellence in areas around continuous improvement and reflective practice, and we would encourage them to be included in the narratives where it's felt it is appropriate. The PCE pilot did consider the criterion of rigour and recognised that this was an important element, but concluded that this could be assessed within the criteria of vitality and sustainability. The panels in the pilot valued narratives that showed that reflective approach and indicated that journey travelled. And the panels will publish further guidance on assessment after the criteria phase. So the kind of things we would encourage HEIs to consider commenting on include the challenges that remained at the end of the last exercise to creating positive research cultures and research environments, the sorts of policies, processes and support that they have introduced and why, evidence for the effectiveness of these activities, partnerships or collaborations, and the challenges that have been overcome to improve the research environment, or how these challenges have been managed strategically with the outputs or outcomes, informing the evolution of that strategy. So in all cases, HEIs are being asked to talk about the effectiveness of these policies, both within the HEI itself and within the sector more broadly, and the sharing of best practices encouraged. Both advisory panels, the People Diversity Advisory Panel and the Research Diversity Advisory Panel, will be advising the main panels on aspects relating to the issues of people and research diversity, and full guidance will be published after the criteria phase. Over to you, Hazel.
What will be the structure of the SPRE statements? So both the institution and the unit level statements will have the same template structure as the unit level environment statement in 2021. The subsections of this are context, mission and strategy, people, income, infrastructure and facilities, and collaboration, engagement and impact. Although you might have spotted that the last one has been renamed to align with the new engagement and impact guidance name. Although both statements will have the same overall sections, there will be differences in the details asked for, so that each statement focuses on aspects most relevant to the institution or the unit, and to avoid repetition. The institution level statement will focus on institutional strategy and systems that support the research environment across the organisation, whereas the unit level statement will focus on the implementation of institutional strategies and on-the-ground practice, but also unit level approaches where they exist. Templates will be finalised with panels during the criteria phase and published as soon as possible. How the statements will be uploaded into the submission system will be considered alongside the finalising of the templates, and we will release this information at the same time. At this point, we can confirm that, as with the E&I impact case studies, graphs, charts and diagrams can be included within text narratives and will not affect the word counts. However, they should always have a description and be contextualised through the narrative. Next slide, please. REF 2029 will continue to use quantitative data where possible to inform the SPRE assessment. For the unit level statement, this will include data drawn from the submission system, such as the number of outputs per substantive link and the number of outputs per subdiscipline in the REF taxonomy, which will act as a reference for the statement of representation, but also data equivalent to what was collected in the REF 4 process in 2021, such as doctoral degrees and grant income. There is a longer list of proposed quantitative data in the guidance, but we are discussing this with panels to see whether there are any revisions or amendments that need to be made. We will also explore whether there are any efficiencies that can be made in collecting the quantitative data and whether to use the income in kind data stream. Next slide, please. So just a couple more points on the quantitative data. We will provide quantitative data for both the unit and institutional level statements. And in general, the institutional data will be a smaller collection of the aggregated unit level data. For the institution level, we will also provide data from the submission system to indicate the size and diversity of the institution. For example, the UOAs submitted for the institution and their volume measures, as well as the units not submitted with small unit exceptions. But for both statements, these data will be used to inform the assessment, and we will expect statements to contextualise and add meaning to the numbers, as they will for other quantitative and qualitative indicators. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So I'm just going to briefly run through now the context and structure of the institutional level statement. So the institutional level statement should focus on how strategies, systems and enabling infrastructure support the research environment in the period between the 1st of August 2020 and the 31st of August 2028. Sorry, 31st of July 2028. It will be assessed by an institution level panel and will be provided to subpanels to inform unit level assessment. Word count will likely be consistent across all institutional sizes, but it will have flexibility to be applied against each of the 4 aspects of the statement as is most appropriate for the institution. So you have those 4 aspects, then context, mission and strategy, infrastructure and facilities, collaboration, engagement and impact, and the word count will be applicable against any of those areas depending on what the preference is for the institution. Next slide, please. And so in terms of the context, so context is key to fair and robust assessment of SPRE, and institutions therefore will be assessed within their own context. The institutional level statement will provide the opportunity for HEIs to lay out their specific context and provide that information about the circumstances they operate within. So institutions are strongly encouraged to outline their context within that context, mission and strategy section, which will be in the template, including aspects such as the institution's stated mission and its strategy for research and the trajectory of this since 2021, the organisational structure and key thematic research areas, the approach to interdisciplinarity and research specialisms within the organisation, the organisational approach to central roles or non-unit level roles that enable support research, engagement and impact, how the institution interacts with the region and its civic or international partnerships, the university's approach to funding, the balance of public and private funding streams, and other external drivers and challenges that shape the institution's priorities. Next slide, please. We just want to take a moment now to acknowledge the institutional level statement in respect to small institutions. So it is recognised by the REF team that some small institutions may have fewer policies, processes and practices, or may consist of such a small collection of independent units that this makes it more difficult to generate an institutional level statement because there isn't such a clear distinction between those central policies and unit level application. So small institutions, including those comprising of just 1 unit, are not expected to write new institutional strategies just to complete the SPRE statements, but should be working with what they have. And institutions are advised to work with the principle that the institutional level statement is the main place to discuss strategy, whilst the unit level statement is the place to discuss the implementation of that strategy and practice at unit level. We would flag that the intention is for subpanels to have the institutional level statements for context, whilst institutional level assessors won't routinely have access to the unit level statements. And one of the things the panels are going to consider during the criteria phase is whether this division should be different in relation to small institutions. And we appreciate that the guidance as published is a suggestion of the approach that small units and small institutions might take, and that more detail is desired and needed. And the panels will be developing this guidance for small HEIs further, and it will be published as part of the criteria phase. Next slide, please, and over to you, Hazel.
Thank you. So going on to the unit level statements. So, as we have been saying, the focus of the unit level statement is on how the institution's research, mission and strategy are implemented in the unit. Although, where bottom-up approaches exist, we are also interested in unit strategy and processes. The period described should be the same as for the institution statement from the 1st of August 2020 to the 31st of July 2028. And the statements will be assessed by the subpanels. As we have said, we are keen to avoid repetition between the 2 statements, so subpanels will have access to the institutional level statements. And so units may refer to data in the institution level statement if that is necessary for their narrative, rather than repeating it. Next slide, please. So at this point, I want to note that the unit that should be described in the unit level SPRE statement is a broader set of people than those eligible to submit outputs. For REF 2029, we want to recognise the broad range of roles and careers that contribute to excellent research, engagement and impact, and how support and development of this wider community is key to building positive research cultures and supportive research environments. So this unit has a different definition from the volume measure, CKU, and engagement and impact. The unit, in terms of the volume measure, is what is most tightly constrained. So the volume measure focuses on research capacity and only covers 2 years of the 8-year REF period. The CKU unit is slightly broader, requiring eligible contracts and spans the full 8-year REF period, as outlined in the substantive link guidance. Underpinning research for engagement and impact must be produced by staff, not students, within the unit, but now also celebrates additional roles and careers that contribute to creating the impact. And so the SPRE unit, SPRE is interested in all of these contributors in all the other types of unit, and additionally includes research students, researchers without eligible contracts, those who support research, and all engagement and impact enablers associated with the unit, not just those named on impact case studies. As in 2021, there is no assumption that units will map onto a single department or group, and if units comprise of multiple organisational groups, these should be identified as well. Next slide, please. So for the context section of the unit level statement, we now have 2 additional parts compared to last time. So in addition to describing the research structure of the unit, there will be these 2 statements, of which I'm going to tell you about the first and Rebecca will tell you about the second. And this first one relates to this new broader unit being described in the SPRE unit level statement. And we're calling this the statement on the research community, roles and careers. This statement will allow the unit to define how they see their wider research engagement and impact community that they will be discussing in their statement. And its purpose is to provide contextual understanding of the people and teams, the structures that support the vitality and sustainability of the unit research environment that will be discussed in the unit level statement. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So the other element that has been added is the statement of representation, which we have discussed within the CKU guidance, but I will provide an overview for it here. So as part of the unit level statement, units will be asked to discuss the extent to which the output pool and associated reserve list is representative of the research activity that has been undertaken by the submitting unit during the REF period. It ought to provide a rationale for any instances where the recommended maximum of 5 outputs associated with a single substantive link is exceeded, and it should also provide a space for the discussion of any areas of research activity that is not represented in the output pool or in the reserve lists. So the statement of representation within the ULS will be read by panels alongside the context and strategy elements of the SPRE submissions and will be used to support judgment on the extent to which the claims that made are supported by representative submissions. And so this will then be used by the panels as part of their assessment of the SPRE element. And HEIs are required within their code of practices to set out their processes for ensuring that their output submissions are representative of the research being undertaken within the submitting units and reflect their research strategies. This is intended to ensure that the processes are transparent, robust and equitable, and they can also be discussed within that statement of representation. Next slide, please. And so just very briefly and sort of discussion of indicators and templates in relation to the SPRE element. So templates and indicators will be published after the criteria phase once they've been confirmed by the REF panels, along with further details on their submission, as Hazel already mentioned, and the assessment process. Now, it's anticipated that the templates will have mandatory sections and then optional details to allow flexibility for institutions to use them in the way that best fits their circumstances, similar to the word counts that we were discussing earlier. So indicators are likely to be a mixture of recommended indicators and optional indicators, and full information of all of the indicators that are on this consideration can be found in the PCE pilot report, which has a comprehensive list included. Next slide, please. And so that's the end of our discussion of the SPRE policy today. And thank you so much for your time. We hope that this is a useful resource to refer back to. And if you would like to sign up to get REF updates straight to your inbox, you can scan that QR code now if you haven't already, and sign up to get those emails. You can also visit our Get Involved page on the website to view current opportunities to work with the REF team on our engagement activity. And if there are any questions that are not answered today, or if you have very particular queries relating to a specific circumstance, please do email us at info@ref.ac.uk. And also, if you have any suggestions on where additional clarification might be needed in the guidance, we'd be really keen to hear from you. And so I'm going to take this slide down now so that we can see the BSL interpreters more clearly and see all of us, and encourage everybody who is taking part in the Q&A to come onto the screen.
Hello. Sorry, just moving myself on. Thank you. Thanks for that. That's really helpful overview. So our first question is, who marks the institution level statement? I think we'll take that by itself. But yeah, do we have a process planned for
that? Yes, so the plan is that the institution level statement will be assessed by an institution level panel, and the exact constitution of that hasn't been decided yet, but it is being coordinated by the panels, the main panels and the advisory panels in the panel criteria setting phase. And once we know more details, we will let you know with the panel criteria and working methods.
Thank you. And will that single score for the institutional level apply across all UOAs?
That is the current plan.
Thank you. Next question is about joint submissions. How will we deal with the institutional level statement for joint submissions when it might be coming from two institutions?
Again, the exact details on this will be something that the panels will be working on during the criteria phase. I do apologise, we may be saying this a lot, and full guidance will be published coming out of that criteria phase later in the year.
Great, thank you. Question now on word limits. Will the word limit be fixed for all sizes of institution?
Sorry, just pressing the right button. The thought is for the institution level statement that the word limit will be the same for all sizes of institution, but again, panels are reviewing this. The current thought is based from an outcome from the PCE pilot, where it was noticed that longer statements didn't necessarily score better, and there was sort of an optimal word count per section that it was useful to present the information with, but panels will have a say.
I think can I just chip in as well? I think that it's an upper limit, but not a requirement, is important to note. So I guess different institutions in different contexts may utilise that differently.
Thank you. So we've got a question about how the REF is considering the volume of work needed for the statement on the research community roles and careers. Somebody's commented that this is like a REF census, but wider, capturing all those involved in research for multiple years.
Yeah, I can pick that one up. This has been something that's been directly considered and is going to be part of the discussion that is as part of the criteria phase, because there is a clear awareness that we don't want to be asking institutions or units to be collecting data that they don't already have. And so that is one of the reflections that is already planned as part of that activity to look at minimising the burden on units and on institutions, but getting the information that is needed. So yes, that has been considered and is being actively considered in the ongoing activity.
Thank you. And what about environment statements from REF 21? Will panels be reviewing claims made in those if updates to the claims are made for REF 29 submissions?
I think there would be practical issues in doing that. I think we would hope that units and institutions would, in discussing their distance travelled, sort of start by saying, you know, where they ended up at the end of the last REF and then how they've moved on since then. And because we are valuing this form of sort of adaptation and sensible consideration of what is the best strategic approach, that units and institutions will be able to create good narratives about that will be valuable and will be valued by the panels. Don't know if anyone else has got a thought.
I'd just add that, again, the exact approach to assessment and the process that's going to be followed is something that the panels will be directly considering, and they will consider that issue as well. Apologies, I did say I'd probably say that a lot of times.
Bears repeating, thank you. So the next question is about the severe financial and operating constraints impacting the sector. How will these be accounted for in the process? Because if we don't account for them, it will have a disproportionate impact on some institutions and favour others.
Yes, this is a really important question, and there'll be a lot of institutions that are concerned about this. We would strongly encourage institutions and units to reflect on this within the context sections of their statements. That is exactly what they're there for, to talk about the circumstances that the institution and the unit is operating within. And it will be important to reflect on how the strategies and activities that the institution and the unit are undertaking have been shaped by those operating conditions, be they financial constraints or other operating constraints. So yes, we would strongly encourage that to be included within both the unit and the institutional level statements. Does anybody want to add anything?
Not from me.
Thanks, Rebecca. How will the institutional level statement be assessed in relation to a unit level statement, and how will the two institutional level statements affect a unit level joint submission statement? I think I know the answer.
You want to go for it, Sylvie? Well, just to reiterate that the institutional level statement will be assessed by an institutional level panel and will be made available to the sub-panels. If there are two institutions affecting a sub-panel statement, then I'm sure we can make them both available. But this is obviously something that panels will be discussing, and the details of which we will publish with the panel criteria and working methods.
Thank you. How will distance travelled, it's a very positive question, how will distance travelled and adaptive strategies be measured in relation to maintaining already excellent environments?
It's a really good question, and I think it's something we will flag to the panels as they are considering their assessment criteria and their approach to assessment, because yes, there will be areas where the distance travelled maybe around maintaining that excellence that pre-existed and thinking about how that has been maintained and continued over the course of the REF period. So great question, and it's something that we will flag to the panels as part of their work.
Yeah, I think when we talked about engagement and impact, we talked about creating space in the exercise for recognizing excellence in the different forms it manifests in the sector. And for me, I think that distance traveled could be absolutely exceptional, but at the same time, someone could have just some submission could have been exceptional throughout, I guess. So I guess it's different contexts, and it provides flexibility to understand those different contexts in the assessment. But yeah, work for the panels, as you say.
Yeah, I'll just add that was a very strong steer from the pilot that excellence could be maintaining your performance in a constrained environment. So links into the context that Hazel was talking about earlier on around the question about financial constraints. So being able to continue to deliver an excellent environment under those circumstances is definitely a positive and something that's worth capturing.
Thank you. The next question is about the indicators proposed in the PC pilot, and the person has some concerns about what was put forward for the pilot and the proposed quantitative data items for SPRE, and they're asking if there will be the opportunity for the sector to feed into the indicators for SPRE.
We are doing engagement as part of the criteria phase with the sector, and the panels will be doing engagement. Is that what you were going to say, Jonathan?
Yeah. Essentially, we're kind of trying to bake engagement into our ways of working throughout the criteria phase, and that will include, with a diversity of different roles, and I think including research offices and will be really important to kind of really important part of that engagement. So it's on our radar, and we're developing our way through it.
I'd also add that the purpose of the pilot was specifically to narrow down on those indicators, and the panels have made some recommendations on which they think are appropriate to be included at this stage. And that's not to say that the ones that aren't being included aren't also important, but are to be considered for future exercises. So I think that saying that most of the indicators examined in the pilot were inappropriate is a short way of expressing that, but essentially that was the purpose of the pilot, was to narrow those down and to focus in on the ones that were appropriate and could be used.
Thank you. And we've got a question about the template and the guidance and indicators being shared ASAP or at the end of the criteria setting phase. Can you give us any clarity on when any of those will be available?
So we are hoping to publish the final guidance and the panel criterion working methods in the autumn of this year. When we say we will make the templates and indicators available as soon as possible, that means that if after the next few months of the criteria phase, we can get those aspects out before the final guidance, we will do so, because we understand the sector are very keen to have this information.
Thank you. And when will quantitative data provided by REF be available to institutions and units, as this will be crucial for finessing our statements?
The process by which we will collect quantitative data is going to be discussed by the panels. We are going to see if there is any efficiencies that can be made on the process that was used last time, but we don't want to guarantee that at this stage. So the final process for that will come out with the panel criteria. If people are unfamiliar with last time, you could have a look at 2021 just to familiarize yourself, but yes. sorry, we can't say at this moment.
Thank you. And will we be able to reallocate the quantitative data to UOAs if these have not been aligned properly via HESA?
That will be part of the discussion that I just mentioned in the criteria phase.
Yeah, I mean, and on this, I think we're really keen. We've heard that it was quite labour intensive, certainly in more places than others in the last exercise in the sort of what was 4A being C in Ref 2021. So we're really keen to explore whether there were lighter touch ways of achieving a similar sort of outcome in the exercise. But part of that is the appetite from institutions to to review the data if we did go down the same route like collecting from HESA. So I think we're keen to do one of the things that we want to engage on and hear more about from the sector as well. So it's in exploration, but we're looking to make save burden if we can, but also want to retain sort of the integrity of the data.
Thank you. Do we have a clear definition of research enabling staff?
Not as yet. What we are hoping is that the panels will be able to give guidance on the sorts of roles and careers that would be relevant across the different disciplines to talk about in the statement on the community and who are relevant to the SPRE statement, because we understand that this is a new thing and having some hard examples will be helpful. So that is what we hope the panels can offer.
Thank you. The SPRE guidance implies that a yearly breakdown of relevant staff by category should be included in the unit level statement. Will there be more detailed guidance on the staff categories and to what extent do those numbers need to be accurate?
Yes, this is something that is again actively being discussed by panels during the criteria phase and will be part of the additional guidance that comes out of the panel working methods and criterion working methods. And yes, details around all of those questions will be part of those discussions.
Thank you. And to be clear, are there any, is it possible that more indicators might be drawn in, or will it only be taken from the list in the PCE pilot report?
That's a good question. Sorry, go ahead, Hazel. Yeah.
No, I agree. It's a good question. I think hopefully Duncan can agree with me that the PCE pilot sort of looked at new possible indicators, and it was assumed that some of the things that were used in Ref 2021 would also be carried across. And so I think there are some of those things also in the current documents that panels are looking at. So for example, the quantitative data that was provided by Ref 4 A and B and C last time is, are quantitative indicators of some sort. So the pilot didn't review those, but we're still looking to use that sort of data this time as an example. But someone correct me if I've got this wrong.
No, that sounds good to me.
Thank you. And there's a request here for more written guidance on the definitions of units. They say that the concept of a staff unit for CKU and impact, as just presented, does not exist in the published guidance. Research is submitted where it fits the descriptor. It's nothing to do with the staff. Research and impact enabling staff often support multiple UOAs and cannot readily be assigned to a single unit submission.
That's a really interesting point, and I think the kind of the description provided, it gives you a sense of the kind of staff that can be included given the guidance around substantive links and underpinning research, etc., in the CKU and the E&I guidance, was intended to just flag that we know that it's not a single definition for a submitting unit across the entire piece. But if it's not the first time we've heard that that might be useful, so we can have a look at whether there's some additional resources that can be created to kind of visualize that difference between the different guidance modules potentially. And I think the point on the research and impact enabling staff not being necessarily aligned to a single UOA is something that we are conscious of. And as I mentioned earlier, there's an expectation or an encouragement within the institutional level statements that these kind of staff members are explicitly considered and addressed, so the staff that support multiple units, but it's also something that we've asked the panels to consider as part of the criteria setting phase. So it's something we are conscious of, and it will be discussed further as the panel develops their assessment criteria and guidance.
Thank you. There's a technical question here. Will we be asked to submit the templates in full? Would be uploading PDFs, or would it be likely that there'd be fields to be completed in the submission system, or the CRIS system, depending on what you're using? For all narrative components, it would be good to have reassurance that you will ask submitting institutions what will work best for them before committing to systems development.
We haven't released any information about this, as we'll be discussing this with our systems team as we finalise the templates and the indicators. There is likely to be, well, it's possible that there will be an upload. It's possible also that some fields may need to be inputted directly into the submission system. And I don't think we can make any further comments at this stage.
Thanks, Hazel. When you say that SPRE is interested in everyone that contributes to research, does that include unpaid, emeriti, honorary and visiting researchers?
Sorry,
That's
just unmuting. I think that's something, as I think Jonathan was about to say, something for the panels to consider, but I think potentially it could. I think the idea of the from the pilot certainly was that the pool of people concerned with delivering research should be as broad as possible. So, you know, research enabling staff should be as inclusive as possible in its definitions, which is, I think, why we're keen to sort of understand this with the panels and how wide we can cast our net.
I suppose the thing that I'd kind of, reiterate is that those sections on the community is about the context of the unit. So it's about panels understanding, who has been part of that unit. So I think, more detail to come. But I think if you keep in mind that it's about providing the context, so the panels can understand what they're assessing. I think that's probably a good thing to keep in mind.
Thank you. How can outputs per subdiscipline be calculated? Will all UOAs utilise subject classifications for their outputs?
I can pick that up. So as part of the criteria phase and the review of the units of assessment descriptors, one of the things that the panels will be looking at is subject taxonomies to help with the assigning of outputs to assessors, and those will be developed by panels, and therefore we will look at including them within the submission system to help with the assignment of outputs to the appropriate assessors. And this is the data that will be used to create that data around the subject classifications for outputs. So that is not something that we are asking units to collate themselves. That is something that will be drawn from the submission system. But further details will be published as part of the panel criteria and working methods.
Thank you. Bear with me. Sorry, I'm just trying to flick through what we've had through and try and get the highest upvotes. We've had a query on a bit of, would anybody be able to talk through a little bit about what happens over the next few months? So our timetable is very high level. What's happening through criteria phase? Would we be able to talk about how the panel meetings work and how we reach the point where we're publishing the final guidance?
Mike, I can do that if that's helpful.
Okay.
Yes, so we're having 2 rounds of panel meetings and some calibration sessions in there as well. I think we're kind of splitting the different topics to be discussed between those 2 rounds, and we're front loading the sort of complex, interdependent, more likely to be interdependent topics in that first round, and there'll be main panel meetings and sub-panel meetings, and I guess the sub-panels will be focusing on where there's disciplinary variation to consider primarily. And we'll run through those processes and those 2 rounds. I think it's up until about July when we think we finish our last meeting, if I remember rightly, and then we run from there on through the rest of the kind of process to publication. If all goes well.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Can you say more about the SPRE volume measure and how it's different to the CKU volume measure and where we can find guidance about it?
I can pick that up. There's only one volume measure for REF 2029. That is the volume measure as relating to the volume contributing contracts that were returned to Hazel, which is calculated for the volume measure. That generates the number of outputs that are required for submission, and it also generates the information about the number of impact case studies that are required for a unit submission. What was being discussed earlier wasn't a volume measure, it was a discussion of what is in scope in terms of who we are talking about when we are talking about a submitting unit. So the volume measure looks at volume contributing contracts only, and that is what calculates volume measures for CKU and for the numbers of impact case studies. And we were discussing who was in scope when SPRE is talking about a submitting unit. So hopefully that's clear. But if you do have any further questions on that, please feel free to email info@ref, and we can look at clearing up that misconception.
Yeah.
And apologies if I didn't explain it well enough.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, just to say that the volume measure, it sort of serves as a proxy for research capacity in submitting institutions. And I guess what that does is determine the scale of the submission they have to put together. So if you think about it as quite separate, I guess, in many ways, and decoupled in this framework from the outputs that are submitted, I think it's about that determining the research capacity and setting the size of submissions that institutions are required to submit.
Thank you. And somebody has asked, is REF 4C going?
So we are consulting with the panels on this because the panel reports from 2021 showed that the REF 4C data was often of inconsistent quality or poor quality, and it wasn't very useful in the assessment. And so if it's not reliable enough to be used in the assessment, then going to the trouble of collecting it may not be worthwhile, but panels will have the say on that.
Lovely. Sorry, I just accidentally did a surprised face on someone's question instead of scrolling. So if somebody received that, that's why. Lovely. Okay, so there's a question here about how do we find out about engagement activities with the research community and how to get involved or make contributions. We're working with the panels at the moment about who they need to engage with during criteria setting. Do feel free to get in touch with info@ref if you think that you're part of an organisation or a body that the panels need to speak to, and we can try to put you in touch with the right panel. So the next question is it envisaged that the quantitative data on volume of substantive links and distribution of outputs by taxonomy subdisciplines be available to institutions via the submission system before they submit, updating with the live submission data? Sorry, I am running out of steam for reading things out. I don't know if that made sense. But otherwise, this means that we may have to craft a statement without having access to the data that the panel will have access to.
Interesting question. I think we'd have to look at that and the feasibility of delivering it. But I understand that the point made. We haven't got so far as to give you a definite answer on that.
Thank you. And somebody wanted to clarify something about do I understand correctly from what was just said that there would have to be a statement about how each person submitted under a UOA has to have a statement on how they fit into it?
No. So without getting too complicated, people aren't being submitted to this ref. So volume contributing contracts have to be assigned to a UOA, and that's part of the volume measure calculation. Outputs have to be assigned to a UOA on the basis of their content and the discipline that they account or address. And then in SPRE, we're asking the units to discuss who they have within their unit that they consider contributes to their research environment. So that is what is intended. Don't know if anybody has anything that they want to add to that from within.
And the idea of talking about the statement on the community is about sort of saying, well, we've got this many academics and we've got this many technicians and we're supported by 2 librarians, and that sort of level of data. It's not about individuals. It's giving a shape of the unit that supports the research engagement and impact that's being discussed.
Thank you. Subject classifications for research outputs are complex and there are many mechanisms for this. How will outputs be reliably mapped to UOA subclassification by submitting units in the submission system given the possible 1-to-n relationship?
So it's a really good question. And again, this is something that is will be considered by panels as part of the criteria phase, and the scope of that question be sort of nailed down as part of that piece.
Thank you. Will there be any more town hall meetings once panels have made the remaining decisions?
I mean, I think that we will enter into a new phase of the exercise, and I think institutions will have all of the guidance in its entirety, and I think the role within the ref team will probably become more outwardly facing in my view, and I certainly would anticipate that there'll be lots of different ways to engage, but we don't yet have a full plan. I don't think for that. It may not be. We've had town halls. I think we want to put down a kind of a baseline, the understanding of the guidance. Recognizing there's lots of different levels at which people engage with the exercise, but then I think there's also people who are making individual decisions about their submissions, and there's perhaps people who want to pick apart the detail a bit more. So I think we need to probably cater for a range of different sort of levels. But yeah, I'd certainly anticipate that's part of our role. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Sylvie. Sorry.
No, definitely. I think that, yeah, we'll be around and we'll be talking lots more over the coming months and beyond and years. So yeah, and do continue sending your questions in about specific issues or interpretations that you need to info@ref in the meantime as well. So thank you very much to our panel and to everybody who sent in their questions, and thank you to our interpreters who've worked tirelessly throughout all of this wonderful jargon. They've done an incredible job again, so thank you very much. And that's it.